I'm going to call the meeting of the County Commissioners for January 24th to order. One announcement, the County Commission meeting is being video and audio recorded. Is there any public comment to come before the County Commission tonight that is not on the agenda? Is there any new business, Commissioners? No, hearing none, we'll go on to approval of minutes and warrants. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and payroll and treasury warrants?
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We have one item of official business tonight. That is the adoption of the 2019 county budget. I ask our finance director, Brian, to come up and present it to us.
Thank you and good evening. So we're here to adopt the fiscal 19 Nantucket County budget. The county is made up of the county administration and then the registry of deeds, which is administration and deeds excise. It has the following revenue sources being the town assessment, deeds excise revenue, recording fees, corrections deed excise, which goes to the public safety facility, registries of deeds excise fund balance or county fund balance if during the budget process we needed to access those. That's fine. The projected revenue is based on is as follows. Town assessment, we have recommended keeping the same at $170,201. In working with the Register of Deeds, we project $446,000 for deeds excise receipts made up of county administration $267 and Registry of Deeds $178. Recording fees of $171,500 and the $250,000 in corrections deeds excise, which is pledged or goes towards the public safety facilities debt service. There is a county funding requirement, which is known as the maintenance of effort by law, that we must provide a certain amount of non-deeds excise revenue to the registry. The amount increases by 2.5% each year. This year, that total is $321,346. It's made up of the recording fees and the $170,000 that the town provides in the county assessment. Those two combined do exceed the requirement, and we've just kept our county commitment from the town the same as prior years. Projected expenses, county administration, $258,964. The main expenses here are legal and professional services, registry of deeds, $494,000. There are 3 full-time employees, administrative expenses, and deeds excise and special projects, and then the $250,000 in debt service that goes for the public safety facility. Projected expenses are $1,003,608. In comparison from 19 to 18, county administration has been recommended to be level funded. Increases in payroll can make up the majority of the change in the registry of deeds, and then the public safety facility. So there's about a $17,000 increase year over year in the county budget. The next steps, I do have to apologize because of the change from last week. We didn't update the January 22nd meeting with the Finance Committee to tomorrow night from your meeting tonight where you'll adopt the budget. I'm happy to entertain any questions if there are any on the county.
Any questions? Are you prepared to take action tonight?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any commissioners' reports or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you.
Okay, we'll call the January 24th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. There are a couple of changes to the agenda. We had an unanticipated item that needs to get signed tonight. It's an estoppel certificate with Sherburne Commons so that they can complete their refinance. So that will be under new business. And we have 2 items that have come off of the agenda because they just weren't ready. Mass Medi Spa under Citizens Departmental Requests, and under Town Manager's Report, the execution of the deed with NISDA. So aside from those, we'll accept the agenda and announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded as well, and Our DPW director is going to give an update on the sewer force main failure. Progress report.
Good evening. Rob McNeil, DPW. So I'm happy to report that the cleanup effort is ongoing. The surface decontamination, the area that was affected by the sewer overflow associated with the force main failure of January 4th, was completed last Monday by our vendor, Clean Harbors. They continue with subsurface decontamination efforts, which essentially have been affected the utilities of National Grid, Verizon, Comcast, and the Wannacomet Water Company. We're moving forward into the recovery phase. I know folks out there are looking for, what's going to happen next, and think like we've gotten a lot of comments like, what's happening? Well, there's been a lot of activity going on day and night behind the scenes with our engineers and various vendors to get and staff working with the state to be able to get DCAM waivers in place, working with town council to get contracts reviewed. So we're happy to report that we're working. Tomorrow we have a contractor meeting on site here and on site out at the project to begin the recovery phase, which will include dewatering, excavation, and supportive excavation efforts to ultimately uncover the broken force main along various locations, the entire force main, to do a complete force main condition assessment to determine whether or not the pipe can be brought back online. We're doing it in a way that will answer a lot of questions fairly quickly and provide enough information for our engineers to inform the next step in the process. Best case scenario is within the 45-day expected contract period, the pipe is found to be reusable, repairable, and within that 45-day period, the contractor would be expected to effect repairs and bring the force main back into service. That would be the best case scenario. So beyond that, we'd be talking about a bypass of some length and ultimately moving forward with a reconstruction effort of a new force main if results came back differently. So right now, the way that the schedule is laid out, the contractors will be given or have been distributed the packages today or tonight, and they'll be on site tomorrow for the walkthrough. The bids will be open next Tuesday with an expected mobilization and start work the day after the Patriots win the Super Bowl.
I have a quick question. Would how much of this could be size related? Is the pipe big enough for what we're putting through it at this point?
So I definitely do not want to answer and won't answer any questions regarding what might have happened.
Right.
Really, my task is to.
Will this answer that when you have or is that a separate engineering study that's happening?
Well, I think the hope is, the plan is that we're going to have a contractor excavate, expose the areas that have failed. Right. The plan is to have quite a circus of insurance adjusters to be able to come in and view in place, take pictures, etc. Those areas would actually be, those pipe sections would be removed, secured, and used for some forensic analysis. Beyond that, really our focus is not necessarily on the mode of failure, but it's sort of moving forward and getting it back online. So there's a number of tracks that are going to happen in parallel there, man.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question, if we do have to redo a whole pipe, let's for argument's sake, we have a worst case scenario, then we have to make sure we build it big enough, correct?
It would certainly be designed, and that effort's actually underway.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right.
You haven't been around long enough to know I ask that question every time.
No, that's quite all right. It's a good
And I'm
question.
always told, nothing to worry about here.
So we're happy to give weekly updates through this process. I sure expect to do that. If anyone needs to contact or get an update on something between then, you can certainly contact me or directly here through the Emergency Operations Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. I would just add that there have been also weekly calls with DEP, which Rob's been handling, and on last Friday, a couple of board members, myself and finance director, visited DEP in their Boston office and had, I think, a good meeting with the commissioner and the director of the Southeast region, who we've been dealing with throughout this process. And they've pretty well cleared us for emergency zero interest loan funding, not funding, zero interest loan. And we're still trying to search for grant possibilities for this eventuality, but they're few and far between.
Just add to that note, as far as funding goes, I know we are, I think the chief might mention this later, but we are submitting the initial damage assessment report to MEMA today, if it hasn't already been sent out. So it's another possible level of funding. Thank you.
So I was pleased with the response we got from the DEP commissioner, had his all his staff there, his financial directors, his chief of operations, the regional director. They complimented our town for the level of communication. As you can imagine, they get lots of questions. So that was, and they also felt that we had really marshaled all the appropriate resources. They really didn't have much to add other than their support, financial and otherwise. So it was a good meeting.
It was.
Next, the sewer director is going to give us a update on the Nantucket Harbor Shimo sewer extension project.
Good evening, everyone. David Gray. The Chimo project's been moving along quite well, actually. They've been averaging between 100 and 400 feet, linear feet a day in two locations. They're working in the Cathcart area in Monomoy, and they're also working over in the Marshhawk area as well. The frost, for a little while there, did slow them down. The thing that they're finding more as a slowing down piece of it is a lot of the utilities tend to wander on the dirt roads, so they're having to slow down and actually locate everything by hand before they can move along. But I mean, today they got almost 450 feet in the Monomoy area, so that's pretty good to include a whole bunch of tees for different lots. And this is the 2-inch force main. So this is the stuff that's, it comes on rolls. It's a little easier to handle, especially when it gets a little warmer. The C Street project is also moving along very well. They're just about done with all the concrete work there. They've done a lot of the mandatory testing for sacrificial dowels for pool tests and everything like that. So that's going along. And the Surfside project's also moving along at or just a little bit behind schedule because of the freezing temperatures. We couldn't pour concrete. So that delayed us a little bit. But other than that, things are moving very well and spending a lot of time with Rob and the EOC with the force main stuff. So we're getting there. So.
Thank you, David. Chief's going to give us an update about the Children's Beach boat ramp project.
Good evening. The Children's Beach Boat Ramp project is moving ahead. We got the extension on the Army Corps of Engineers permit. We anticipate that it'll be done around the 1st of February. Right now, they're resetting, they're regrading the base. They've got the concrete slabs they're going to put back. As soon as they get the base finished, they'll start putting the concrete slabs back and then building up the dock extension and then removing the cofferdam.
Great, thank you, Chief. DPW is having a couple of public informational sessions regarding future sidewalk improvements in the Easy Street, Broad Street area. And those, do you want me to say it or do you want to say it?
Just wanted to add and remind folks that it originally went out as a Easy Street, Broad Street project. Because of the most recent incident. We've added South Beach Street and South Beach Street Extension to that same mix since we're going to be reconstructing those areas. So while we did not do the same detailed outreach that we have previously done for the Easy Street and Broad Street folks, we hope that we can attract as many people that are listening or have been listening for the last few meetings along the South Beach Street and South Beach Street Extension area to come to the meeting tomorrow night and the subsequent meeting in February on the 22nd to essentially give us your feedback and thoughts on what you'd like to see for the future for the sidewalk improvements in this whole area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing that's not on the agenda. This Saturday, the 26th, the Finance Committee is going to be reviewing departmental budgets from 8:30 to about 1 here in this room. The public is more than welcome to attend, and the schedule, I think, is online. So if people want to come, we would encourage them. And happy birthday, Madam Chairman.
This is the public comment portion of our agenda. If there's anything that anyone wishes to speak about that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Hearing none, we'll move to new business in regard to executing that estoppel certificate for Sherburne Commons.
I read it. It's pretty straightforward. So it's what we discussed. So I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Move to approve.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments on the contracts? Okay.
I move approval of the pending contracts. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Now we have an appointment to fill until April, a full seat on the planning board. And we're going to call a joint meeting with the planning board to do this.
Good evening, Board. Barry Rector, the Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I just ask for a brief indulgence at this point. Ms. Williams had to step out for about half a second.
Okay.
I'm expecting her right back.
Okay.
So
We'll pause for a moment.
thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Do they have to go into, do you guys have to go into session today? Yeah. Why don't you guys call your meeting, because you've got a quorum, call your meeting now and go into session now.
I know that Linda's had a family emergency today.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I know that Linda's had a family emergency today. So.
Yeah, it's like I said, she was here. She stepped out for a minute. I'm expecting her right back. So go ahead.
If you call the meeting to order, we can have the applicants
And that's
come up and introduce
That
themselves.
sounds like a grand plan at this point. So what I'd like to do at the moment as Vice Chair of the Planning Board is to call a meeting of the Planning Board together at the moment. Barry Rector, who is here at the moment, and John Trudell, who is here, and Nat Lowell is here at this stage. So we're duly convened as a quorum at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I would invite the applicants to come up to the mic if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Fritz McClure. Was I expected to say anything?
It's completely up to you.
David Callahan, member of the, associate member of the planning board.
Thank you. I know we had information in the packet. If anybody had any questions. No? Okay.
I don't know whether you had questions.
Well, that's what I think everyone does not have questions. So we'll just wait for Linda.
I'm sure I could make up a few. if you need me to.
You can always play a word game. Planning is to pancakes, and zoning is to.
There you go.
I don't know the answer. But
Sounds like can of worms to me.
just an SAT warm-up.
Would it be inappropriate to go to the consent part?
Yeah, we just bounce ahead and come back.
Right, we'll just skip ahead and do the consent item. We have some planning, execute, purchase and sale agreement, all detailed in the packet.
I'm okay with it.
Any questions?
No. Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I don't want to get into the review of the capital programs.
Yeah, number 2.
Okay. Does anyone have any concerns with extending the noise bylaw in this case?
No way.
I'm going to make a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And we should probably explain for the public what we just did there. Basically, what we've done is they've had a request for a waiver of the noise bylaw from 10 to 7 in the morning, January 15th to March 31st, for dewatering and excavation efforts. And we need to get it done. So that's what it was.
Sure. So we'll jump down to Town Manager's Report number 3. Granting of utility easement for Nantucket Electric Company for C Street Pump Station. Does anyone have questions? Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So the joint meeting's been convened, and the applicants introduced themselves. So I think we're ready to vote unless anyone had any discussion. So do we have paper?
Paper ballot.
We can just.
I assume we've already been called to order.
Barry called it to order. Yes.
Okay.
And the
We have some stuff to say.
did you want to make a comment? Sure.
First, we'd like to thank Joe Marklinger for his years of dedicated service. We did sign a letter and send it to him and thanked him for working with the planning board and other entities for years. It's nice to see 2 great candidates who have applied to fill the seats from now until the election. They'll have to run again, whoever it is, if they want to stay in the seat for the remainder of Joe's 2-year term, but they have to run again at this next election. David Callahan, as a board wanted me to say something about David Callahan. He was a Board of Selectmen appointee last year, I believe. He served as an alternate well, been an active participant. He's always got something cogent to say. Normally, permanent seats are filled by an alternate. That's the way it's gone for many years. It's an opportunity for them to move up. As they've already gone through the process, they've sat there through all these meetings, and they know what the deal is with the planning board and how it works. In turn, it also creates another alternate position vacancy for anyone to step up into that position. The Board of Selectmen appoints the alternates. The planning board does not. The 5 members of the planning board are elected, and the other 3 alternates are appointed by the Board of Selectmen under the statute. So we'd like to welcome whoever it is aboard, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
I guess I have a question. If we wanted to fill both tonight, is that possible? Let's say David is elected. We haven't had it advertised, so we can't do it.
It's up to you.
So we could, if David goes into the seat, we could have Fritz become an alternate.
It's not required to advertise.
Okay. All right.
It's-
Well, we'll see what happens with the vote.
Excuse me, I apologize.
But John, that would be acceptable if we were to fill an alternate seat as well tonight, if it became available?
Was that part of the notice?
No. Do they need to
Is
apply for
is the alternate, I'm sorry, is the alternate an appointed? Oh, I'm sorry. So, yeah, so that, you could do that. You only need the notice for the
For the
elected
elected seat.
position. Correct. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's to fill that would fill, if David was appointed, that would be to fill David's seat. I think he's got 2 more years on it,
It's expires
No,
in
it's-
19.
maybe 19 next year.
Did anyone have any other questions, comments?
I guess my only comment, the reason I asked the question is, if Fritz is not elected as as a member, I would like us to appoint him for the next couple of months. He tried to run last year, and, I think it's important, so.
And if Fritz is elected, then David will stay.
Dave will stay as alternate, and then both positions are full. Was the thinking on that.
Okay. To me. Thank you, ma'am. I'll mix them up. Huh? Right, I know. Linda Williams for David Callahan. Barry Rector for David Callahan. Jim Kelly for Fritz McClure. Rita for Fritz McClure. Matt Fee for Fritz McClure. Jason Bridges for David Callahan. John Trudell for David Callahan. Nat Lowell for David Callahan. And Don Holgate for David Callahan. So David Callahan is appointed to the full seat to fill out the term until the April election. And I would certainly entertain appointing Mr. McClure to the alternate seat if I think that he might be
Are
inclined
you interested
to
in being
accept
an
that.
alternate for the next 2.5 months? Oh, through 19?
Well, unless he wins
Unless
the
he
election.
runs.
Yes.
All right, so moved.
Second.
To clarify, if Mr. McClure fills David's seat, his term is technically through 19.
Right, but if
he
he
can run for that vacancy for the 2020 seat, but if he doesn't get it, he'll still be
an alternate.
through the 19.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Yes.
I think we could just take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Well, thank you all for coming and for people being willing to serve on these committees and boards. Planning board, excuse me, not committee. So we are back to citizens departmental. Or did you want to adjourn your meeting, Linda?
Yeah.
Linda, can you guys adjourn your meeting?
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Thanks. Thank you again for coming.
You want us to flip through your pages?
No, if I'm going to go quickly through the pages, if you don't mind clicking through with me, Erica.
Good
Am I
evening.
on?
Yes.
Good evening, and happy birthday, Madam Chair. Stephen Welch, here to formally submit the Town of Nantucket Capital Program Committee's FY19 report and recommendations. I serve as the committee chairman, and I'd like to call to order our meeting. We have a joint meeting, and present Peter McEcker and Peter Kaiser, Richard Hussey, Christy Kickham, and Jason Bridges. Can I get a motion? And Nat Lowell. Thanks, Nat. And I'll take that as a motion, so that's unanimous. So our meeting is also called to order. Excuse me. I'd like to mention that our report and recommendations distill about 800 hours of analysis and evaluation into 20 pages. Actually, it's 33 if the links to some table formatted data are included. So there was quite a bit of editing involved here. A copy of the report is in the board's packet and will be posted on the town's Capital Program Committee webpage. Is that right?
Yes.
So tonight, you'll be relieved to know that we're not going to sit through a page-by-page or a PowerPoint presentation. I'll provide one of the shortest executive summaries around, and then briefly outline the contents of the report for listeners here and at home. The executive summary is that of 67 FY19 requests, totaling $86 million. The Capital Programming Committee, CAPCOM, recommends 60 requests totaling $66 million. These projects represent the interest of the town of Nantucket, some admittedly overdue. Insofar as requests and the actual content of a report, and as said, to help put these out in the public arena, the outline is as follows. Standard fares and introduction, included for context, including the CAPCOM's role as it relates to the town adopted financial policies and procedures for best practices. There in the introduction in here now, on behalf of CAPCOM, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the town manager, our finance director and financial analysts, the department heads and their support staff for their dedication and assistance. The success of the town's capital improvement plan depends on each of their efforts. And the same goes for the capital committee members. Many thanks to each of you. On to the other content. In terms of the report, the general enterprise and fund account requests are summarized on page 2. These are detailed within Appendix A on a line by line item, request by request level. Funding sources are summarized on page 3. These are categorized by general enterprise fund account, then type of funding source, and then they are detailed in various regards in Appendix B. Requests greater than or equal to $1 million are listed on page 4. They are categorized by type of fund. We felt it was important to include, and some of the different funding source mechanisms require under state law, that projected impacts to taxpayers and ratepayers would be included. These are addressed on page 5. Taxpayer rates by mill rate in a table format. And to the extent possible, ratepayer rates are addressed too. Page 6 addresses debt service, principal, and interest. It actually provides links to the amortization tables for the respective general enterprise accounts. Those tables are based on the funding sources included in the report, and any of the assumptions that are related are stated. Page 7 provides information on our procedures in the analyzing and evaluating of requests, including how we have set up and deployed department liaisons, our ranking and prioritization process, a newly designed capital request form, and a relational database we are working with town manager and finance to develop. The database will greatly assist in the capital planning process. Let's see, procedural recommendations are included on page 8 and 9. These include reevaluation of town of Nantucket, required annual minimal capital investment based on a fiscal model that is updated biennially, congregational planning with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom, department heads, and of course, town manager and others, which is to focus on capital outcomes that matter most to Nantucket's long-term goals on a needs-based timeline, integrating long-term fiscal planning, and doing so as a focus group with each of the different elected and appointed boards represented. Other procedural recommendations include tweaks to the annual capital planning timeline and intra-reporting requirements, and an initiative to address capital growing pains before they become fiscal health issues. For now, it's referred to as CAN-DO. It's an acronym for the initiative. Omitted at this time is discussion of the capital improvement plan being discussed each year at annual town meeting, something that we felt was important but is a little premature at this point. The remainder of the 20 pages consists of the appendices. Of those not yet mentioned are 2. One explains typical Mass municipal capital funding sources. The other is the town's tax rate history dating back to 1971. So that's what's in the report. I should probably note that our committee continues to recommend a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom for this fiscal year capital planning request to address any questions of a line item nature. Actually, I understand that we met with FinCom on Monday, and I apologize, I did not get a notice on that. In any event, the idea of having a joint meeting is that we would have an opportunity to sit down and address on a line item basis, request by request, any of the information that respective parties might be interested in learning about. I myself have various tabloid-sized spreadsheets that I use for reference. So I think it might be beneficial, the Capital Committee members felt that it might be beneficial to do that in a group setting. It would also give us an opportunity to more broadly discuss capital planning process and kind of get into the actual details about the procedural recommendations we've made in our report, which are, we feel, very important procedural recommendations. So that's the summary. I hope you each have an opportunity to read the report thoroughly. And if you have, or if you've started, and with town manager and finance here, we'll field any questions or take comments. And I might suggest Appendix B if there's any thoughts on funding.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say, being this is the first year, obviously, that I was on the Capital Program Committee. And at first, Steve and I even told you, I was a little skeptical of this new process. But as we went along, I started to understand it, and it was very intricate, but it really made us think about every single project and why it matters. Not just the dollar amount, but what is it all about and why. When that kind of transferred over into the department head who was telling us why. And so I just want to commend you on, you really ran with this process, convinced us, and I think it's going to be great. It's going to be better going forward. And this report I'm very impressed with this report, how thorough it is, and also easy to read.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you.
It is readable, so thank you. Very
Good.
readable.
It is readable.
I know you spent a tremendous amount of time getting a new process in place, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a group effort, and as I said, with between town manager and finance and the assistance of our capital committee members, it couldn't have been done. It was a team effort.
You had a recommendation for the minimum allocation for capital, which is 1% now. You considering raising it?
Well, thanks, Matt.
And I think that's a good recommendation, but I'd like you to explain to the camera why.
Sure. Well, it's actually, this year, the dollar amount, just to give it some context, is, I think it's $898,000. And that's a 1% of the past year tax revenue and an additional 1%, inclusive in the 898 of projected real estate property taxes and personal property taxes, so that we get a total of 2%. This year was 898. And what we were looking at and suggesting is that kind of taking on a capital improvement plan capacity and funding analysis biennially, so that we're taking and we're modeling the 10-year capital improvement plan on a 2-year increment to using, a consultant in municipal financing, so that we're looking at our fiscal capacity, we're looking at the different methods of funding and what those costs are, to use that information that then inform what our minimum requirement would be. And then, of course, with respect to fiscal planning, the minimum requirement is going to have other variables involved, not least of which what our revenues are and what they're projected to be. But what we're hoping to do is get this on a type of a regularly cyclical plan, or I should say periodic, and just help us make better informed decisions as we're going through the kind of growing pains that we're facing with a tremendous amount of growth in capital expenditures over the next 10 years or longer due to new growth on the island, and also just to maintain capital assets that are in place. It's going to be an expensive undertaking. We have the fiscal capacity, but it's just a matter of planning. And I think in the bigger picture, what we're looking at doing is trying to help with our professional staff through the capital committee. Part of our recommendations indicate that it's not something that can only be done through the capital committee, but the idea is to be taking some of the load off by our group focusing solely on capital and bringing in some of these best practices. So I sorry to broaden that out, but
Right. One comment, it would be, I think if it's going to, it dragged a little bit this year, it should be a little quicker in the future. And if it can't be, we should move it earlier. I think a lot of the stuff is coming to us at the FinCom sort of last minute. And I think we need to push that deadline up. I say that to a lot of people who show up here. The tax rate, I think we can, and I agree with, everything you've recommended. And the rate sort of matters, but if you look, everyone goes, oh, our rate is low. Yeah, but our assessments are high. And it really is the ability to pay that matters. And there's a lot of small businesses and a lot of people on fixed incomes. So a little bit of an increase does matter to them. What's recommended here, I think, I might have it wrong, but it's just a little under 0.5%. Isn't that the?
yeah, I mean, a relative scale, it's minor. And then I know it's not necessarily relevant to everyday people working here, but I mean, on a scale of, in Massachusetts tax rates, if you look at Newton, Boston, and Cambridge, which are really comparable median value real estate values, their real estate mill rate is anywhere between, I think it's $6.57 and $13.34 or something.
Yep. Then what is their average wage for their residents?
Their average wage is actually in some of those areas, depending on if you're looking blue collar, white collar, whatever statistics you're looking at, they hover around the same. The real estate asset values hover around the same. They just have a larger stratification in terms of a lower wage, in terms of the number of individuals who might be at a lower affordable, or, a larger city is going to have poverty rate that's going to skew the earning worker dollar averages.
Right, because a lot of times when I've looked at this, what I find our average wage here is closer to sort of the towns out in Western Mass than it is to Concord or Lincoln, the towns we always pick and say, geez, they pay so much. It's not just our buildings. There's a lot of people. It's, you have something that's worth a lot that you've had for years, but your ability to pay is more difficult. So I just think we have this, Debbie Dilworth and I always have this discussion as well. And it's not just the tax rate. You've got to look at that in comparison to, what people can pay. So.
Yeah, and it's an important dialogue to have. And then to bring to the voters is what I think our belief is.
Right.
Any other?
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Great, good job, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may. This is a tremendous report. I commend the committee. They did a great job. I just want to apologize. We met with the FAA in between time before they got this here. There's a project in here that we're going to be deferring. It's the taxiway E, which is about 5.5 million. So, but again, trying to sync everything with FAA appropriations and everything, it just didn't work out. So.
Okay, thank you.
Tom's wearing a pretty nice sweater, isn't he?
Okay, so is there anyone from the public who had any comments or questions? If not, okay, thank you.
Oh, actually,
Oh, do you want to adjourn your meeting?
I apologize. Could I just have a motion to adjourn CapCon? So moved. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to budget reviews.
Madam Chairman, just one last quick thing about the capital items. So the board, I think, has previously gotten a list of the funding sources. And when we get into the town meeting warrant discussion, we're going to have a discussion about the ballot questions, and they will relate to some of these projects. Okay, so the next, so town manager's report, right. So we've got some enterprise funds here tonight to go through their fiscal 19 budget, proposed budgets, as well as their first and second quarter budget reports for fiscal 18. And I think we've got Island Home first.
Good evening. Rachel Day, Director for Human Services. This is the FY19 budget for our Island Home. I'll give you a quick overview of where we have been for fiscal year 2018. Our mission has remained the same, ultimately to provide 24-hour nursing care for those in our community that require it, and to enrich their daily lives as best we can, encompassing the entire individual and making it as person-centered as possible, of course, within our budgetary constraints as best we can. The goals that we had for this fiscal year was to implement an effective quality assurance performance improvement program. This is language determined by the regulations that are required of us. In the next coming year, this will be a 100% requirement. Our Island Home has always kind of been a little bit of ahead of the game on this in terms of our policy and implementation, and I think we have a very effective program going on right now. We also want to implement the changes in regulations, the QAPI program being one of them. We are in about phase 2 to 3, and we usually, Erin Kopecki, the assistant administrator, has been very instrumental in keeping on top of what those changes is and the changes to the policies. We also want to begin implementation of electronic medical records. That has not yet occurred. We are still waiting for a contract to be awarded, and there is still some back and forth language issues that we were having there. It's kind of common when you have municipality and healthcare. They require certain language, we have certain language, and it's just, we came across it in our billing as well, so we will get there, but it's just becoming a little bit of a process. We have started doing a little bit of education in the new survey process. We are not necessarily where we should be with this at this time. We just had our survey, as I had updated you before, in November, and we just missed the new QIS survey, which is Quality Improvement Survey, I believe was what the I stands for. And it's a whole new survey process. It's very electronic driven. There's not a lot of judgment calls on the surveyor's part that are part of the process. It's taken them a while to implement that themselves because of their level of education needed. So we just missed the cutoff for that. So the next survey round, we will have that, and we will begin kind of reviewing that process and what the differences will be for the rest of the fiscal year and into fiscal 19, as well as implementing a compliance and ethics program. We've started this. And I think I mentioned this a little bit later for the final goal for fiscal 19. So the overall accomplishments that we've had thus far, we've hired an assistant director of nursing. We have been completely unsuccessful in filling the staff development coordinator position, which has been an RN position. As you know, we've had staffing issues in that area across the board. So we did find another avenue to fill a lot of the clerical duties of that position by hiring a clerical step-down type of pay position so that we can maybe disperse a lot of the duties rather than putting them on the director of nursing. We've expanded family and resident involvement in our initiatives and goals for improvement of the facility. We have not done this yet. But hopefully one of the initiatives we will have is transitioning of the new administrator. As many people know, we have been in the middle of a search at this time to fill me in the role of the Island Home administrator there. And then, of course, breaking out the roles and duties of the two jobs that I think they're a little meshed, so we want to make sure that that's an appropriate transition for when that occurs. And then we have identified as a new initiative recently based on our survey, a little bit more focus on end-of-life care overall and education in that area. So for 19, some of the priorities are ultimately the same: electronic medical records, nurse staffing is a big one. We really need to focus on how we can retain and attract our registered nurses and LPNs for the facility. Our staff education and orientation, we feel that we've identified that needs a little bit of work, and that will be an initiative for fiscal 19. The full transition of the administrator, we would like to collaborate with other healthcare agencies on ethics programming, such as the Cottage Hospital has recently engaged in a very good ethics committee and has invited us to be a part of their initiative and their ethics committee to enhance our own. Emergency preparedness drills and updated procedures is going to be a huge priority for fiscal 19. This is on the very top of the Department of Public Health list through life safety and overall quality. And there's a lot of changes going in that area. So we look forward to working with the emergency management coordinator for the town on those changes.
Is that driven by the state?
It is driven by the state and the
Is that
federal.
why it's a bigger priority?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A lot of the disasters, a lot of the, 100-year storms, a lot of the impacts of those on nursing homes, and they've definitely upped their ability for nursing homes to be prepared to actually have evacuation drills. People might have a policy in place, but a paper policy isn't really going to help you when water's rushing in and you actually need to evacuate and your staff have never been properly trained. So they're very focused on that. Building upgrades. Hopefully no surprise there. And then key staff education, nursing home regulations. So a couple significant changes year to year. Like I mentioned, the quality indicator survey, the physical plan to the facility. And I will likely mention this in a little bit, if not during the quarterly updates, but low census and staffing challenges. Again, key issue being the building. Sure. So here's an overview of the fiscal 19 budget. This gives you a 3-year comparison. The about average is about a 5% growth over each year, and we are still looking at about a 5% growth between fiscal 18 and fiscal 19. There are a few areas that we've identified to increase the budget based on where we're currently at. You can see the budget increase and decrease in the overall line summaries attached. Obviously, payroll salary is one of them. We have some repairs and building maintenance, and then the typical payroll areas such as medical insurance, Barnstable County retirement. And there is a large increase in professional services, and I can address that on the other slide, and unless anybody has any questions on this at this time.
I don't have a question, just a comment that's sort of what we have to do as a town and as a board is look at, the salary, and then the benefits and everything as a whole.
Yes.
And it's substantial. And, 7% doubles every 10 years. 5%'s what, could be 12, 14 years? It's substantial. And so really, our job, which is not easy, your job, is what steps do we take to keep those things in line? And how do we, not crowd out everything and have a facility fall apart again?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's important with the camera, people say it's not that we don't, we want good services. We want people taken care of, but at the same time, we have to do that in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah.
And we need to have those tough conversations at some point.
And it's a very large bulk of our budget that we focus on.
Exactly.
If there are areas that we can improve or not, I have heard industry standards tossed around a lot in terms of staffing. Our island home is above those in many areas. We heard that from the consultants when we were looking at changing the model as well. So that could be a future area that maybe we could look into and review a little bit more in depth to maybe help that growth. But we are looking at right now for fiscal 19, as you can see, a budget of about 8.6 million, which is pretty large operation in terms of budget for a 45 licensed nursing home.
Yeah, and that's up from the average of 7.6.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's when we talk about this is a, you know, sort of intractable problem. That's part of what the people are worried about.
Yeah.
And you know that. I'm saying again for
Yeah.
the camera, this is a difficult situation.
Absolutely. And then this is just our organization chart so that you can kind of see the different areas and different departments of the facility. This has not ultimately changed much at all in the past few years. And then these are the exceptions for FY19 that were referenced in a few areas. So the new OIH administrator position. We also have the capital items, the supplemental funding for the upgrades. One of the previous presentations I provided was needing additional funding based on the bid responses that we got from the project was much overestimate than we had projected at all with the architects, and that is to cover that. We will be using retained earnings out of that, which is why that's listed in there. And then the operational expenses. So the top two being repair and maintenance to the building itself. There have been a few things that we have not engaged in or we have not done that we are now looking at doing in a more in-depth fashion. They're not necessarily capital, but they are considered building improvements. But because they are a lower hanging fruit in cost, we definitely need to add that into our operating budget that maybe we didn't plan for previously. Professional services. This is more of a, in potential anticipated cost. This ultimately would cover travel agencies or the need to house those travel individuals. That obviously was something that came up for fiscal 18 that we had not budgeted for or anticipated. So this provides that cushion in our budget in case that we still need to engage travel agencies into fiscal 19. I think that this is likely going to happen. We're coming up in February. We have 2 agencies out there. There's not much response from them at this time. So I think that this could be something that we might have to engage into July and then further on. And then professional services, medical, that mostly relates to increases in just the general cost of medical supplies, the needs for pharmacy, but the bulk of it is related to the physical therapy and occupational therapy contracts and the anticipated increase in those contracts. And then the custodial linen and bedding. We do have the resident room upgrades that we're planning on doing for furniture and a few other things. But a lot of the actual linen and bedding materials that the residents have could probably use an upgrade as well. So this is to allow for us at this time to be able to go and do a full upgrade of all the towels and everything that they use on a daily basis. Any questions on that?
I had one question. Looking at the maintenance department, you have cooks in there, housekeepers. How many of the, and now there's like 8 or 10 people, how many are
Is this on the-
maintenance people?
Maintenance is, we have 1 40-hour, 1 32-hour, and 1 40-hour supervisor. So ultimately, there's 3.
There's 3, okay.
Not so much in the budget, but looking at your, I guess, the initiatives and accomplishments, it says hire of assistant director of nurses.
Yes.
Now, is that but then I heard you say there's a person's doing clerical duties?
The assistant director of nursing is actually a position that I originally filled at the nursing home that we never filled as we merged with the duties that I had done at that time. That position remained unfilled, and we dispersed them to the assistant administrator, staff development coordinator. So ultimately, it's clerical in the sense that it's not clinical. So they can't administer any of the vaccinations, but they can set up the clinics. They can upload the vaccination information into the online system and do all that. So it's clerical in that sense.
It is a RN, it's not a clerical.
It is not an RN or an LPN, no.
So it's a clerical person, administrative assistant.
Yes.
So I mean, maybe it's but to me, that's more of an assistant to the director of nurses, not the assistant director. I believe you were checking at your licensure. You may need to have it.
I believe the position's official title is actually assistant to the
Here we
director of
go.
nurses. I
Okay.
just didn't add that word in there.
Thank you.
So yes,
That's
that
a
is strictly
clarification.
clerical.
Otherwise,
The rest of the presentation is the detail that goes into these overall numbers, and I am not going to go through them. So that's ultimately it, unless there's any other questions. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess just one note is I was able to sit in on the interviews for the new director, and I'm just really pleased with the candidates that have come up from the firm that we engaged. He's done a really good job.
But in the interest of continuity, maybe we should have Rachel do her 18 budget at the same time in the department, so we're not going back and forth. Would that make more sense? Sorry, Rachel.
It's fine with me. So we have the first quarter of fiscal 18 and the second quarter of fiscal 18. I will likely maybe go a little bit more in depth maybe in the second quarter, but ultimately some of the messages are the same. So for the first quarter in our Island Home, we did see a drop of about 14% from the first quarter in fiscal 17 in our revenue. And we are looking right now at where we should be to the fiscal 18 first quarter budget of a deficit of about $134,000. What that ultimately means, and I believe it's in the notes section, is that we have experienced a average occupancy percentage decrease from the first quarter. Yeah, thank you. So right in this quarter, with 45 beds, we were looking at only about 86.5% of our beds filled compared to the first quarter in fiscal 17, which was about at 94.3%. Because we had that decline and it remained fairly steady, that's when we started looking in September at the end of this first quarter at putting a few of the beds out of service so that we were not paying the daily bed tax on that. So these percentage rates are on 45, and in in quarter two, you'll see the two different percentage rates because we ended up taking them out and got approved to do that in mid-October. So those were approved in the second quarter. We also had what this equates to ultimately was about 319 less billed days for our residents. So we were looking at a pretty significant dip in revenue where we anticipated to be. The expenses were not equally decreased. A lot of that was because our payroll remained the same, staffing levels remained the same. We anticipated being able to fill the beds. That did not occur. This is probably one of the longest times I've seen the decrease in census that we have had. And we've also, even though we had maybe a little bit less in food, I believe it shows at about 17% less than where we were before. That ultimately is offset by the overtime that was generated in our nursing department because we'd had those positions unfilled. So while we did have a decrease in some areas such as food or medical supplies, the decrease in the amount of that cost was so minor compared to the overtime payroll costs that we were experiencing. And the nurses would never decrease staffing levels based on what we had. It would be any of the other ancillary departments, such as CNAs, housekeeping, maintenance, laundry, that we would probably decrease. Our staffing levels for nurses, regardless of the bed size, really can't decrease based on what the facility needs are.
Right, you're at your kind of your minimums now.
Yeah. We would never, because you have one nurse on for 3 to 11, one nurse on for 11 to 7. You can't take a nurse away for that shift, regardless of how many people you have in the building. So ultimately, we started a little bit of a concern in where we at with our revenues and a little bit of discussion on that.
Well, that sort of answers one of the questions was, would it be more efficient if we had a smaller facility with less people? Well, this answers, in my mind, this kind of answers the question.
Yeah, right now we are kind of a smaller facility, but we still have the same amount of people.
Right, and so I'm not so sure that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, I know someone was asking that when we talked about, like half a year ago.
And our expenses compared to quarter one in 17 compared to quarter one in 18, we're only up about 1.8%. But ultimately, that's the higher health insurance and the regular wage increases that we've seen that increase in.
Right.
But your staffing is variable when it comes to the CNAs.
It could be variable when it comes to CNAs,
So
yes.
with the reduction from 45 to, 30, what's
We're
our
at
census
36
now?
right now.
36, so that's, so
We're
what,
technically, we can only fill to 40, so yes.
no, I understand, but have you, there's an opportunity therefore to look at the CNA. and
There
reduce
is, that would require some discussion with the bargaining unit.
No, I understand, but, okay, so
Yep.
there's a significant gap there in terms of.
Yes. So if you could go to quarter two, it gives you a little bit more of a, so again, the message ultimately is about the same. The amount of billable days has it's not doubled. Yeah, that's fine. But we are at about 536 less billable days. So we're not necessarily at 14%. We're below budget, but we're at 12.5%. So it's not too much better. And what that equates to in dollars is $266,000. So we are working with finance right now to discuss how we manage this, knowing that we are going to have a shortfall in revenue. It's just ultimately likely impossible to make up that funding source. We see that in our mass health residents and in our private residents. We have not seen a decline in the revenue related to our Medicare residents. We tend to average at any given point in time about 2 to 3. That has continued to stay the same, but where we're seeing the reduction is in our general population, not in our skilled level need. So the general, just custodial 24-hour care is what we're seeing the census reduction in. So where we were in quarter two compared to where we're at now, technically, if you run our numbers, we look at that we're at about 91.5% full, but that is at 40 beds. So to do a true comparison for 45 to 45, we're only at 81.3% average occupancy filled, where at this time last year in fiscal 17, we were at 94.3%. So we're not seeing an incline in census. It's continuing to stay steady. So there has been some need to have a few more discussions internally and some review at potentially taking maybe more beds out of service and what any impact in other areas of our expenses that could be. We really haven't seen too much of a dip in our expenses. Again, same reasoning. Our payroll expenses are remaining the same, if not higher than where we anticipated because of the nurse overtime, which is pretty significant, about $70,000 over right now where we were originally budgeted for our LPNs for overtime and regular salary because they're picking up so many of the shifts. So that's really any reduction that we're seeing in expenses because of our reduced census is it's just washed because of that payroll expense.
What is the hourly rate difference between a nurse working overtime and your contract labor that you've budgeted? They thought.
I'm not sure I understand.
So if a nurse works, time and a half at whatever that is, $70 an hour, and your contract labor rate is what?
For the visiting nurses. What the hourly wage rate for our LPNs is?
No, we.
Oh, our travel agents.
Right.
It really depends on what they provide us at that time.
My point is that sometimes the overtime is maybe even less than or equal to
Yes.
the cost of contract labor or traveling
Yes.
nurses. So
I would agree with that. I would say it might be 60 something, which is what our cost country is because of their
Right.
overhead costs, but that is not what the LPN overtime rate is.
No, I'm just talking about RNs. And then you also don't have to provide housing, which you have to do for the.
I would say it's about the same with RNs. Our RNs start at a pretty high, I think it's
Okay.
for
So-
time and a half for RNs.
Right. But we budgeted, we gave you the dollar, whatever that was, 80 or 100, I'm not sure the amount for contract labor for travel nurses several months ago.
Uh-huh.
And you can use that as a way to balance the cost of the overtime if you're not using those dollars for travel nurses.
Well, we do have a travel nurse right now that those dollars are being used for.
Oh, you do? Oh,
Yes.
I didn't think you had one. Okay.
We have the one LPN. We originally had her through March. She started in the beginning of December, but she's needing to leave earlier than that. So we have been using some of the dollars, yes. But the difference, I believe, is that that was, I guess I would have to consult with Brian on if we would be able to move those dollars from that as a contractual into an operating budget.
I'm talking about the bottom line as we look at the enterprise. So that's, which is fine.
Yeah.
If I'm saying this correctly, it's a revenue problem at this point.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
no-
ultimately a revenue problem. Yes.
And
So we
what's the
will,
way to increase revenue? What's the way to get, more beds open, attract more people?
we could try a little bit more aggressive marketing, I suppose.
I'm asking the question.
I'm not necessarily sure I really have an answer. It's been an interesting 7 months for our census. Like I said, this is the longest I think I've ever seen it stay this low.
Right.
So that's a little concerning. We're not really sure what's going on or why, but it is what it is. So we still work very closely with the hospital. It also is the time of year. We do tend to have less admissions this time of year. Okay,
Thank you, Rachel.
Is anyone else as nervous as I am, looking at those figures?
It's pretty predictable.
Okay.
I mean,
It is,
we knew that was going to happen. They have an opportunity to reduce staffing based on the lower census in areas like the CNAs. So it's not just a revenue problem, it's an expense problem too.
At the level we're at, but I think trying to understand why there's that drop is part of figuring it out.
Well, maybe this is more macro, but in all of our consultants' reports, we heard we looked at the numbers, the dramatic decline in dollars spent by the Commonwealth on inpatient nursing home care, and how that a year or so, how long ago, that line is now dipped below what the expenses for home health care, and that's where the future is.
Yeah, the model is changing.
Yep.
So that's.
And we don't have an attractive facility for people who can go elsewhere and have support systems to take their relatives off island.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
Sewer?
Good evening, everyone, again. We'll try to move through this fairly quickly so everyone can get home tonight. Our mission statement hasn't changed at all. A couple of little things that, we've increasing a couple of pump stations over the next year as we go forward with this Schimmel project. Our goals as we move forward still want to meet the state mandated discharge limits. We continue to create a professional sewer department as we move forward. We're 14 months old in this so far since November of 16. we've come a long way. We still have a very long way to go, but we're moving along as we can. Some of the big goals is to complete the C Street pump station upgrade, which is anticipated to be sometime coming up this summer, before we get into the swing of everything. The design phase bidding and everything was completed for Schimmer. That project's well underway, as you've been hearing every week with my reports. Has a completion date estimated in early 2019. That was about a 500 and something day project altogether. So that's moving along well. A couple of, like I said, the frost slowed us down a little bit. We've been moving along at a few hundred feet a day right now with everything, and it's going well. The procurement for all the grinder pumps and stuff will be coming up here shortly in the next couple of months. That'll be going out. Upgrades at Surfside still going on. That's another estimated completion in 2018. I know you've heard a lot of talk over the past about the CMOM and CCTV and all the other acronyms going on. That is well underway. We have completed all of the CCTV in Wisconsin. We're almost done. We're about 80,000 linear feet right now on sewers total. We have found quite a lot of interesting stuff. We found a lot of II inflow and infiltration coming in different areas. Recently, we did a bunch of smoke testing to add to that the CMOM stuff in the area north and of the C Street pump station. After we had our main failure, we went down and started to smoke all the areas again, just to see if we could find anything that's changed. And we found quite a few, a lot of small things, nothing major as far as II coming in, but a lot of little things that add up to a lot. So my crew is actually out knocking on doors trying to fix different things that we're finding. So that's the CMOM program's going along very well.
A question on that. How do other sewer departments deal with that issue? With II or sump pumps put back into the system? How do they test it and find it?
A lot of it's done with smoking. I don't know if anyone has seen the smoke machine. It's just a giant fan that sits in a manhole that blows the smoke in. And we just have guys staged around, and you just walking through people's yards and see where it's coming out. The other thing is done with the CCTV work, which has become very handy. And one other tool that we're moving forward to this spring is we'll be installing flow meters in strategic locations around the area, upstream of pump stations, so we can try to really target when we get a rain event versus a flooding event versus a high groundwater level, and we'll be able to see where the flows are coming from in real time. That's going to be pretty interesting to see how that works. We have our ideas where some of the II is coming from, and we located one down on Wall Street this week. They were dewatering a job site to put a swimming pool in the house, and that was a huge II flow that we found that we shut off the other day, so that's been completely solved. So, and a lot of it has to do with maintenance on people's yards. We found 3 or 4 different. Everyone has a sewer clean out in their yard where you see the little snub sticking out. Well, we found a few of them that had been run over by lawnmowers and completely cut off, so they were wide open. And with the flood waters in that whole area, 3 to 4 feet, that was the direct input into the sewer. So we found quite a few of those. So it's a challenge. And some pumps are even bigger challenge because almost all of them have check valves. So the smoke doesn't get into the home, so you can't notice. So you actually have to knock on doors or try to do dye testing, which we do quite a bit of. So II is a challenge. It really is a challenge.
And so I guess, so you were measuring the water, you're measuring this water in. If you measured the water out, would you collect, if you measured, I'm just thinking, because you're saying you're catching the flow in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you caught the flow, at the residential level, you'd catch it.
We will catch it. And
Does anyone do that?
They do, and that's how flow meters come into play. You can actually put flow meters in certain areas and neighborhoods where you can say, I'll use like Wall Street for an example. You could put a meter at Wall Street by Easton, and you could catch everything in that area, which is something that we're going to be doing and looking at. We also can tell what pump stations might be seeing different inflows by coming in, by their numbers, and you can see it when it rains. Numbers go up some, numbers come down some. So it's wet seasons, our numbers are up. Dry seasons, our numbers are down. So there's a lot to II, and we're really being quite aggressive out there on our tactics to try to solve this.
Because I remember we did it 20 years ago, took a lot of it out, and then a friend came and told me, oh yeah, we connected that like 3 days later.
Yeah.
connected right on, I won't tell you where.
No, it has. And,
Not in that area, but
Yeah.
others in the town.
and I know when I was a plumbing contractor, that was the same thing. We ordered to take them out, and we always get the calls to put them back in, and it's everywhere that's going on. And the smoke testing and all that testing that was done back in 2005 and 6, we met with that contractor today, actually the guy who was here doing all the work. And he actually sent us a lot of data that we had not had. So he sent a lot of that electronically today. So that's going to help us, give us areas to actually focus in more to see if some of that's been put back in.
Are there fines associated with doing that?
That's all stuff that we're working at within the regulation changes and updates to the regulations coming up that we're aggressively working on as well, that will be coming to the commission to take and look at fining or fees for a lot of dewatering going on, a lot of basements being sump pumped, and can you even get to the point where you can charge them fees to either go into the stormwater system or whatever like that? So there's a lot of stuff coming that the commission and the board of commissioners will be seeing here coming in the near future. Grease is another huge issue that we're struggling with a lot. Wipes still continue to be a big issue, and during the force main issues, the screening assembly that we made, we took 2,300 pounds of debris out of there in 3 days. I mean, that's amazing on something that we made quite quickly, and that's what we're taking out of the plant every day. So a lot of challenges, but we're
At a slow time of the year.
at a slow time of the year.
Slowest time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Wipes are an industry-wide, I mean, that's a lot of I was just up at the conference this week, and that is huge in so many spots. I mean, the wipes destroy pumps. There's, constantly having to pull pumps, increases your maintenance, increases your having to repair stuff. Before we had screens at the plant, we were constantly having clarifiers break or pumps jamming every week, which would take 2 or 3 guys days to work on it, pull them away from other projects. So a lot of challenges with the collection system, and I have an extremely good crew, and we're finding a lot. So so we can move forward. Like I said, we've been a standalone department since 2016. Extensive capital plan has been itemized and presented to capital committee. We're operating in a very proactive format. I'm sure everybody sees the guys out on the road on a daily thing. For an example, in past years, we would average between 2 and 5 sewer calls a week. People would call and say, "Oh, I have a backup. My sewer's not working." Last year, we had 3 calls altogether for the whole entire year. And that's because of the aggressiveness of the crew and out there doing the maintenance and the vehicles and the specialized equipment that we've gotten. We've been a lot of training the last year, and the guys are excited to be out there. And the investigative stuff is pretty cool when you're out there checking things. Our priorities still develop a fiscally attainable budget as we move forward. And the biggest priority we have is identify and prioritize the critical infrastructure, additions, repairs, and replacements. That, again, as the CMOM comes up again, that is a key part of the CMOM, which is going to take and locate, and it's going to take and label and prioritize all areas that have been cambered, all areas that have been smoke tested. Any of the II stuff, it's going to label that as in a priority list and give recommendations on what type of repairs. Do you do a cured in place patch? Do you do a spot patch? Do you dig up the street? It's going to be a very detailed thing you'll be seeing here coming up in the future as far as the CMOM. The CMOM is extremely important right now. Some of the significant changes, we're looking for additional staff to include an on-staff engineer to address our critical needs going forward. Also to make that person our compliance and plan review person, to take some of that burden off of me to go forward. They'll have them doing a lot of the plans so we don't have to rely on outside consultants. A big increase in the budget has been outside consultants helping with plan review. So if we can try to bring a lot of that in-house, we could definitely benefit from that going forward. We did acquire a specialized CCTV truck, which will be here. It was supposed to be here next month, but the chassis has been delayed until April. And once that comes in, that'll again give us the ability to do a lot of our own work, CCTV stuff, to take and eliminate some of the outside vendors and thus bring costs down ultimately. So it's going along very well. Some key issues, again, design and programs for repair for longstanding maintenance issues. Again, they see the CMOM a lot in all of my stuff. That document that we're going to end up with at the end is going to be so critical moving forward. And it's going to be very well laid out. So we'll have the answers and we'll know where all the problems lie. We won't have to guess or have an idea where the problems are. We're actually going to know and physically be able to see it. We're still working forward a lot on our CWMP. It's still one of our biggest issues that we have going forward. We're just about exactly where we should be based on that 2014 CWMP and the 2004 CWMP. Our numbers and our estimates of where we are and what we're replacing are just about right in line. And another thing we plan to do coming up will be to Sconset's kind of the forgotten area, although it's extremely critical and extremely important. It's got a very old collection system out there, dates down back into 1920s and earlier. That has been all cambered now, so now we're going to have that report coming up pretty soon. So we'll be doing the independent CWMP of Sconset coming up. Again, this gets into the numbers. I don't know if anyone had any questions specifically, or we can just continue forward. Again, our organizational chart has grown over the last year and a half. Again, that has to do with a lot of state requirements and the adding of SHMO flow, the collection system that we're adding, the compliance that we're looking forward to get into more. So, and the possibility of bringing in maybe a seasonal intern to help with a lot of grunt work, so to speak. Hand them the GPS equipment and let them go around and locate every manhole, locate every storm drain by GPS coordinates. So,
Maybe it's just a typo, but on the schedule, the yellow column says FY18 budget and the green column says the same.
yeah, I noticed that just as we were going through this. I noticed another,
the
we
green
missed
should
another
be
typo, so
19.
they should be 19, yes. So going forward, as we get into our the exceptions going forward, we do have quite a lot. I can go through each and every one if you'd like, unless you have specific questions. A couple of ones that might stick out to people that are pretty important. You'll see a lot of safety uniforms and protective clothing. A lot of the regulations have changed. Any person that works on any electrical motor control center or electrical panel has to wear special equipment, and that equipment, the uniform itself, can cost anywhere between $1,700 to $3,000 per person. We have limited people that work on that electricity just because of safety reasons and qualifications. But for us to go in to a pump station to turn a pump off, to take and pull the pump, to derag it or something, those people have to be in special arc flash equipment, arc flash goggles, special gloves. So it's very expensive. The rules and regulations keep changing. So that's some of our heavier numbers that you see there.
Well, so you dealing with three-phase or 220, or what's the?
Oh, almost everything that we do is 483 phase. So it's not just your normal 120. It's 483 phase, and I get to the point where if there's an issue, I turn it off and I call the guy that knows how to do it. So
You don't mess around with those.
no, it's going forward again. There's a breakdown of all the different. Excuse me. See, these are some of the big capital, the funding exceptions. Again, If you need me to go through them, I can. You will notice that some of the sewer main replacements that I have listed here are in conjunction with the water company. So we are working very closely with the water company this year and DPW. We've created maps, overlay maps where, excuse my voice tonight, I think everyone's coming down with the same thing, so.
You're sounding like Bill Belichick.
A lot of people are probably glad I can't talk right now, so.
He's sharing a lot more information than Bill Belichick does, though.
So again, you'll see some pretty big projects here, but it's in conjunction with the water company. It's in conjunction with sidewalks, roadways. Let's go in, let's do it once, dig the road up, and then be done for 15, 20, 30 years. So if you have any questions on these.
Dave, I just wanted to point out one thing. I was sitting in the capital program committee and listening you go through all your capital projects. I want to make sure everybody understands that there's been a lot of focus on sewer, and out of the $60 million that's proposed in the capital program committee, a third of it is for sewers. So we're not focusing on sewers just because of what happened on South Beach Street. This has been
Oh, no, this has been ongoing, yeah.
ongoing for a while, but it's a third of the capital
Yes.
projects for the whole island. So it's extensive.
And a lot of the numbers we got are actual numbers. Because of the SHMO bids and the recent water company bids, we actually have hard numbers. So these should be very good numbers. I don't know if there's anything else you want to go through as far as going forward before I totally lose my voice. So.
Good job.
Thanks, David.
And I don't know if you want to go right into some of the first and second quarter. Yeah, you have this first sheet that shows the basic stuff. Might be a little easier and quicker for me to go through this without having to completely lose my voice here. Everything's running just about where we were last year. The expenses are up a little bit. Revenues down a little bit with some sewer permits. And it's not because of, in 2016, we did 226 sewer permits. We issued 226. In 2017, it was 242. A lot of those are disconnects or reconnects. This year has been an overly busy year for homes being either removed from properties, torn down, or just picked up and relocated on the lot. There's been a lot of that this year, or homes that have been moved from one area of the island to another lot that already had sewer on it. And those are just subject to a disconnect, and there's no fee for those. So there's some offsets there that show that. This year was very, very busy. Monomoy was a big area for that, and some of the outskirt areas. So that's one of the decreases that we see there. The other thing that we're noticing on some of our stuff is, you'll see it on the electric, is with some of the new practices that we're doing at the facilities operationally, and just with process techniques that we've learned over the years and going through, we have decreased some of our electric usage, which I know makes Lauren really happy. We always get an email from her saying, what's changed? What are you doing? It's different practices. This year, we're going to see definitely with the cold temperatures, our oil is going to go up. So there's some expenses that have gone up, but there's some expenses that have gone down. So both quarter 1 and 2 are just almost where we were the last couple of years. So we're doing a lot, but we're keeping it in the same area. So, we can get into a lot more numbers if you'd like, but some of the biggest things that we've done is we've decreased a lot of overtime by being extremely aggressive with our preventative maintenance in the collection system. So not to have 4 or 5 calls in a weekend or 1 call a week. So we've been able to decrease our overtime tremendously. Some of the numbers have been. So I don't know if anyone has any specific questions or not.
Anybody?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Is Gronk going to play?
I was the only one in Boston, I think, that doesn't watch sports. And I was sitting most times at tables with people, and I was totally lost. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. Artis was with me. Artis Carey, my chief operator. And that man knows everything about sports. So I just sat there and just looked at him all day long. So sorry, I don't know anything about sports.
Answered it just like Belichick.
Excuse me. All right, Rob McNeil, DPW, back on the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. Try to move things along a little bit. Just a quick note, Matt, I have been talking to David about the sump pumps. And in my experience, communities I've worked in the past, some of the things that we've dealt with for sump pumps and should keep in mind, we're certainly removing that mostly groundwater flow from the sewers. So it needs to go somewhere. Generally, if there's an on-land application, so it's just out the back door type of more rural type of situation, most homeowners can take care of that. But as you know, that's not generally the case across the island. It's generally in the very populated areas, high density, and there's really nowhere else for the water to go. So what we've worked through in the past is you need to recognize that these areas need a place to discharge, not necessarily in the summer where it might be an inconvenience to have a wet sidewalk, but it's when it's icing conditions and that sort of thing. So recognizing that, removing sump pumps from the sewers is not an easy task. It's a combination of, as David mentioned, regulations, maybe fines into the regulations, but it's recognizing, finding them door to door, basement to basement, and then ultimately we need a place for it to go. That's going to include capacity analysis and increasing capacity to accommodate those flows into our storm drains. And ultimately, before we can accept the flow, it comes back to the legality and the liability associated with taking flow from a private residence and then allowing that to pass through the public's infrastructure. So if we're going to provide that platform, there needs to be a deeded easement, essentially referenced back to the homeowner, so that in the worst case scenario, when an oil tank falls over and spills and gets into that sump pump and discharges through our system out to the harbor, let's say, it's traceable back, and the responsible party is actually on the hook through the deed. So, so other things to consider would be an upfront amnesty program to allow people to upfront participate in a program to cut this over. And then once that amnesty program sunsets, then it's all hands on deck as far as find them and try to. So we would absorb the cost initially to try to get everybody over, and then after that, it would be their responsibility.
Right. No, I asked because they did a lot of good work 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and removed it, but I think a lot of it's made its way back.
Sure.
It's amazing. My first house, we had a high water in the cellar issue, and we finally fixed it, right before we sold it, figures, but it was the amount of electricity to pump that thing constantly. I mean, it was incredible.
Sure.
And it was hundreds of dollars a month.
So we pay attention to that. We have pumps that are probably 20 times the size of that we maintain at Children's Beach, the stormwater pump station there.
Right.
So that's another whole discussion for that end of town. Any new flow that comes that way means more electricity use, more pump, O&M, and that sort of thing for handling those extra flows.
And you're going to have Rita start talking about how you can do it without pumps at some point. She sent me plenty of stuff.
Jumping onto the fiscal 19 solid waste enterprise fund, setting our priorities based on your priorities of transportation, environment, and housing. We can walk through the litany of responsibilities and what our critical assets are. But ultimately, we are moving forward with a number of different exciting changes for the solid waste enterprise for fiscal 19, which are the ones that are in our control. Because as I mentioned here, storm impacts and weather, some things that are outside of our control that do affect things out there. So the completion of the line cell 3A is expected to be brought online soon. It has not been completed according to the deadline of the contract. We'll be reviewing that with town council soon, but it's very close. So I expect that to be online certainly first quarter of the calendar year here. Significant improvements to the quality of the finished compost and topsoil is a goal that we've been working with Waste Options and all the folks that have been participating in the most recent landfill forum. We got a lot of good feedback, and I know there's a lot of folks out there that are interested in that coming to fruition as well. We're working with various stakeholders to expand our environmental monitoring program to inform future decisions. One thing I'd like to mention, and my hat's off to Waste Options, we've been working closely with them to get a series of test wells reestablished that were lost about 9 years ago when the radio tower came down. So they stepped to the plate and replaced those wells, and they will now be back added to our monitoring, testing, and reporting, which I'm happy to report. We are planning to hire a recycling coordinator, first of its kind in fiscal 19. I'm happy to report that through a generous grant from Remain Nantucket, we're being allowed to move forward with that hire in first quarter 2018. So in the coming months, we can jumpstart that hire. So thank you to Remain. So there's a number of things listed here that we're working towards. Whether they're ultimately funded or not remains to be seen here. We're moving forward with building relationships with DEP. Sometimes getting regulators out to the island can be challenging, but we rely on phone calls and emails, and it's been good relationship building so far. We're expanding our data collection and analysis of the solid waste operations to ultimately identify some trends. And I'm hoping that I'm planning that our recycling coordinator will definitely get involved in working with some of our other consultants, George Aronson and other folks, to understand, a lot more detail of what's going on, what the trends have been, how they can be tied back to all the different activities on the island, the construction trends, et cetera. This graph just simply shows that we've had a leveling off of the mixed excavation waste, the blue line labeled as mu, and we've seen a little drop off of the volume of C and D. We're continuing to monitor that, but that's both of those are reflected in the budget presentation for the quarter two that we'll go through. We can skip that. Going. Just highlighting what's going on at solid waste. It's broken down in the org chart as recycling, municipal solid waste, otherwise known as MSW. With that goes through the composter. For folks that don't know, then we have construction and demolition debris, otherwise known as C&D, and then our contract administration with Waste Options, some long-term planning for fiscal 19, and then take it or leave it. So the exceptions for next year, Again, I mentioned the recycling coordinator, full-time role, and we can get into details about that. We have the cardboard baler replacement, something that's been on, being held on by a shoestring over there by the Waste Options folks. It's been on the docket for some time, and it's needs replacement. Again, with sorting station repairs, should be mentioned that under the contract, the town is on the hook for repairs and maintenance and upkeep of the materials recovery facility, the MRF. That's the one front building that where the drop-off of recyclable materials is. For operating expenses, changes include professional services increase, which includes changes to legal, monitoring, sampling, and reporting, as well as long-term planning efforts. It's our hope that working with the town manager's office that we develop a long-term planning committee for the landfill itself to understand what that's going to look like in 25 years. And more importantly, what the end of the contract that's coming in 2025 is going to look like. What's the next contract going to look like? So we're going to have those discussions starting soon.
I know the Vineyard is working with Steamship Authority to do, see what the cost of shipping things are, et cetera. And I think we could tag on that and learn some from that. Our shipping costs will be higher, but they're doing a pretty big study of that.
Thank you. Freight, freight increase there is generally its expenses related to tipping fees and moving our recyclables and other materials off island, primarily construction and demolition debris. And then repairs and maintenance to the building, just moving that up a tick to get some things done that have been deferred. And again, professional services in the recycling and MRF building. Is there any questions with the budget? All right, I can move over to the quarter two. I'll go right to quarter two. That'd be great. The graph one. It's good. Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, and as the previous graph has showed, there was a drop in C&D and mixed excavation waste, and a subsequent drop in tip fees associated with those. So we're tracking a little bit more closely, and we're relying on, I think, January's numbers to really help inform what our expectations are to how that's going to play out in fiscal 19. But for now, it seems like we had some pretty large projects that were happening on island over the past year and two that have started to get into more construction phasing and less demolition. So there's been a lot of renovations. There's been a lot of large construction projects that have brought us both mixed excavation waste and C&D. So for first and second quarter, we've seen a drop. We're down about 5% in the tipping fees associated with lower volumes at the landfill. And we haven't, for a revenue drop, we haven't had the public hearing yet, which is scheduled next week for the landfill fees. But when it comes back to volume, we're down 10% for C&D as compared to this time last year.
How does your, and I'm looking, is your freight, because I know we were paying more than we were bringing in. So is it, how it was in relation to freight? How does it?
Right now, we're trying to be a little bit more creative with freight because we're trying to master the backhaul. to take advantage of the fees that we're currently paying.
Right.
So we've been working together with Waste Options, and I'm excited to report that earlier in December, we hauled our first backhaul of salt. So Waste Options was able to change over the trucks they were using, the trailers rather, from a live floor trailer they're delivering to Brockton, to the large C&D operation there. And so I worked together with Waste Options to say, hey, let's find a different truck, trailer rather. So they went to essentially a large dump trailer to provide the same service, but now they can actually haul back salt from Boston when they go to Brockton. So that's working out for us and saving us quite a bit. The next move is because we do C&D so often, we're going to be putting together a contract soon for a vendor of construction materials, the sort of things we use all the time: crushed stone, dense graded crushed stone materials for road base. As we get into the grading season this year, we should be able to bring that to bear at a substantial savings to the town. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Selectmen's reports and comments. Adoption of the annual warrant. And we need to talk about the election warrant as well.
Okay, so Madam Chairman, since your last meeting, we've been working to refine the warrant, mostly formatting, but a few wording changes here and there, and putting the zoning articles and the real estate articles in order and filling them in with information that was still needed. So if anybody has any questions about that, we can get that answered. Meanwhile, I have a few things that I need board direction on, or I think that you may want to discuss. And in order of the articles, I think there was potentially some discussion about Article 27, which is an appropriation for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
So there were some concerns raised at the Finance Committee meeting this week about having some more defined plans on creation of affordable units, and some concern about the amount of funding that we had suggested. And I had a suggestion to fund it at $300,000 for this year, and with the continued direction to try and create some new units and get some more definitive plans to do that. And, hope to plan to fund it further next year.
What does CPC fund it?
400 this year. I
Both
believe.
were, so that means that both were cut. The CPC by 200,000, and now FinCom, correct, yeah, it wasn't it? Didn't we have, it was reduced to 400,000 from 600,000, wasn't it?
CPC didn't
Oh,
fund,
CPC,
didn't
sorry,
fund
no.
it 600 last
Yeah.
year, no.
But there is a decrease in the total amount now for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has been significantly reduced. I think I'm definitely struggling with this, as it feels like we're sabotaging ourselves. If we have on one side saying that a priority is affordable housing, and then in the midst of it, we're defunding it at the 11th hour. So I would really like to know somewhat explicitly what the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has to do to not get defunded. And as a point to note, Island Housing Trust on Martha's Vineyard, who has 16,000 people as their population, has $24 million over 5 years to put into creation. And I think that losing 300,000, we can't do anything. So I'm very disheartened by it. I do think there needs to be greater accountability from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but I think there needs to be explicit direction as to exactly what needs to be put out there so that we don't get defunded.
Good evening, David Worth, Chairman of the Finance Committee. So good question, Rita. Thank you for bringing it up. Just a little bit of background. So we met with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund last Thursday, and had a good meeting with several of their members to go over their programs. I would say that a year ago, when the Affordable Housing Trust Fund came to us, came to the Finance Committee, and I think we funded $500,000 last year. That was the request that came through the Board of Selectmen. We made it very clear that to the Affordable Housing Trust that we were looking for a plan on how to spend the money. That what we saw last year was a lot of good ideas, and that it was appropriate. The Finance Committee thought that they come forward with a plan on what they're going to do with the funds. Beyond just, we need to have, quote, dry powder so that we can make an acquisition of land somewhere down the road. So in the course of so that was great. So we had a good conversation on Thursday with them. I think the opinions of the members of the Finance Committee were made known to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund folks and vice versa. So today is Wednesday. So on Monday, in the process of us reviewing the warrant with the town manager, we came back to this section. One thing I would say is in the budget that was presented, there are programs for them to pay for closing costs. I believe there's grant money that's going to Habitat, and they had a couple of defined programs, but the largest amount of the funds were to go to this fund that ultimately would identify property that could be acquired. So a couple of comments about that. There's not enough money, the way the town is going about this, to come up with a fund where the Affordable Housing Trust Fund can be a credible player in the acquisition of property. We talked a lot about them being involved in buying down, creating affordability through buying down rents or the like. Great idea. No plan on how to really execute on that, or at least our members felt that way. The second part of it was that until the Affordable Housing Trust Fund gets a guaranteed revenue stream or semi-guaranteed through the form of the 0.5%, I believe, that was going to come through the home rule petition. At that point, then you can leverage the money to actually really do something, acquire land or become a bigger player. The other thing that we weren't convinced about was that because there's a committee, but there's no leadership, was the ability of the trust to actually get in the deal flow and understand early enough or know about projects that they could, if they had the money, actually make the investments. So we had a pretty good conversation about it. And Jason, I can't remember, had you left by then?
I was there for most of it.
Okay. So we had a good conversation. We did not take a vote, but we individually, people were polled. And what I conveyed to your chair and to the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is there probably isn't enough votes to get a recommendation to adopt. And, we would like to see some, as proposed, perhaps a reduction in the 600. It gives the trust plenty of money to do their programs that they've identified, and for them to come forward, hope that the legislation passes, which the committee members thought would happen this legislative session, which would then obviate the need to have the town continue to put money in. And we are just very hopeful that they will use this opportunity to really come forward with a good plan on how the money is going to be spent. There is absolutely nobody on the committee that is not supportive of affordable housing. This is not a comment about that. It's not a vote against affordable housing. We all unanimously want to see it go forward. This is really a comment that we don't think it's very well organized, and from a fiduciary perspective, feel that That group should just continue to work and go forward. At the same time, they're getting $400,000 coming in from CPC, so it's not as though they're being, quote, defunded. It's been a reduction. So happy to answer any questions, but that's the logic and the train of how we got to where we are.
I think and I think the point is definitely taken that, in terms of accountability, leadership, and vision. I think that the vision is extremely difficult. This is a problem that towns all over the world, cities are trying to crack. So I think I'm just disappointed, really, that it came down to that this wasn't a discussion that is ongoing throughout the year, that there are check-in points or something, because I do think that a year losing money sets us back, particularly when it comes to property and land. And I also think that if there's a better way for the town to be doing this, then we should discuss it. And the role the Affordable Housing Trust Fund will play, but then there needs to be some other complementary way to get there.
Wouldn't at all disagree and would encourage the Affordable Housing Trust Board to, get their act together and move in that direction. I mean, I think that we gave that very clear request a year ago, and it's, we're certainly not constituted to be the conveyance to make that happen. But everybody on our committee really wants. We know this is a challenge. We know it's complicated. Perhaps we don't have the right structure to move this forward. I mean, this may be hard to do with a volunteer board. There's not even a paid person to sort of funnel this to. It's a group of citizen volunteers who are trying to make decisions about complex problems. And, we on the Finance Committee sort of only see this. I mean, we know it as citizens, but we only see it officially, once a year. So, I would encourage whatever, policy changes you guys think ought to be made to, to move them forward. We very much want to see this be successful, but we also don't want to see the taxpayers' dollars squandered.
So I wasn't comfortable moving forward with the 600 and having a negative recommendation from the Finance Committee. I think that it's important for us to be united on housing issues and how to fund them and move them forward. It was suggested that a lesser amount
Would 300 get a
would
positive
be
recommendation? Was 300 get a
in a
positive
more positive
recommendation?
way.
Or 300, and understanding that a real plan comes forth in the next year?
So we did not, as I said, we did not take a vote. We will have this discussion tomorrow.
Right.
I believe that this is an appropriate compromise that could be supported by the Finance Committee, with the added caveat that we really do want to see a plan. I mean, and we're not talking a 40-page plan. We want to see some concrete movement forward in this, as I'm sure you all do too. So.
I agree. So I make a motion to accept Don's movement to 300,000.
I'll second.
Okay.
Just for discussion, because I was at the Finance Committee meeting a year ago with the same stipulation of coming up with a very concrete plan. And I know it's difficult to be specific, but to the, if the goal is to submit a plan to the Finance Committee, I don't know if there's a joint meeting or something, but it needs to be clear from the beginning what the Finance Committee would consider to be a good plan. And I would maybe add that to the motion. I don't know if I can, but maybe just add as a comment to the discussion.
I think that's something that's a topic that generally comes up often, where people feel that there's not an explicit understanding of what is expected in terms of the information that you need to have. And I think that applies to many of the different situations we're in. And I think that if it was made clear that there's a risk of being defunded if we don't have A, B, and C, and you don't deliver A, B, and C the following year, that would be fair. I understand your points and the message that the FinCom is sending, but I do think that, again, getting it at the 11th hour when we're trying to make headway with affordable housing does feel.
But here's I'll comment on that, is I think this is part of our, unfortunately, our process. So many things are coming too late. And so that's an issue that I brought up last year. Didn't really do much good this year. We should talk about it after we get through this. But I think, we should be getting these things 2 months ago completed, not, the weeks of. So that's, that's a culture that, a culture of last minute that needs to change. I think your comments at we were doing strategic planning, and you were talking about how you measure things. Well, that's why you have a plan. Like, I think the public needs, there's a history here where people feel like, we spent a lot of money and nothing ever happened. And there's a hesitancy and people don't want that to happen again. Well, the way that doesn't happen is you put things on paper. You say, we looked at all the different ways. We looked at, you need money. Some things can be done with other incentives. We looked at all the different options. Here they are. We looked at them. We've picked these, and therefore we're concentrating on these. And here's our goals for this year: who, what, when, where, why, how much. That's what we're doing. I think that, so that to me, would be what the FinCom would react very favorably to that. I guess I would react more favorably than that. And when things are not written down, and when things are, sort of, well, we don't do it that way. We're just, we think this is a good idea. It's, I think that gets difficult. So that, so I think, it isn't just money, it's how you spend the money. So
Absolutely.
Money isn't going to solve a lot of problems. Sometimes it creates them. It's how you deal with it, how you spend it. So.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is lacking, at the moment, it is lacking those milestone measurements as to what we're actually achieving.
Our housing specialist would like to make a comment.
Thank you for the opportunity. Tucker Holland, housing specialist. I'm not on the board of the trust fund, nor am I a staff member to the trust fund, but I just thought I could shed a little light on this. I really appreciate Mr. Kelly's comment about maybe a little clearer direction from the finance committee with respect to, the plan that would actually satisfy them. I think included in the budget for this year was several programs which Mr. Worth talked about, including among them, the buy down and acquisition approach, which really both are geared toward unit creation. But there's a little bit of the unknown that until you can interact with a developer or a party in good faith, knowing that you have the financial wherewithal to actually see something through, it's a little bit of speculation at the moment. And certainly the passage of the Housing Bank Bill, which, many of you on this board and many in this community have supported, strongly, and was just on the phone with Dylan Fernandez earlier tonight about it. That would solve a number of things. But the trust in reality today is not in the deal flow, quote unquote, because the players know that the funding is limited. So there are things, and I can think of some recent examples, which we talked about with FinCom the other day, where if we were in a stronger financial position, we would be able to be involved and get to the unit creation in a meaningful way that I think we all are trying to get to. So we always appreciate the dialogue with FinCom. I think there's some excellent, some excellent thinking that we get from the group. The trust has been the beneficiary of an introduction that Mr. Worth made to a seasonal resident with a great deal of expertise who has been instrumental in the Six Fairgrounds Road project, and as well has spoken precisely to what Mr. Worth said about a program that the trust could undertake through land acquisition to actually do an innovative unit creation project, if not in Massachusetts, perhaps, in the country. So maybe not all of that gets translated in the FinCom discussion, but I just wanted to add a little bit to the discussion here tonight. Thank you.
And Tucker, I think if I can speak, yeah, I think if some of that is put on paper, here's what we're thinking, that it's, well, we haven't seen it, then if it is, Linda, we haven't seen it. Well, we've seen the production plan, but you're saying, I've seen the production plan.
Let's not.
No, I'm not arguing, I'm just saying, if that's saying, hey, here's what we want to do, and if there's limited dollars, what incentives can be in place with limited dollars? Have you guys looked at those or have they looked at those, and what are they?
There were a couple of examples that were, on paper and in discussion that, were part of the discussion, the other day. I mean, I think we all ultimately want to get to the same place, as I think Rita expressed, a little bit of an 11th hour surprise. But we want to make good progress. So thank you.
Okay.
So is it appropriate to call the question?
Yes, we have a motion on the floor.
Right, and seconded.
Oh,
Yeah, just before you do. We're not going to move the goalposts year after year on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So, I mean, we'd like to see, we have a very experienced group of people sitting on the Finance Committee. Most of them came up through a very metrics-driven background and orientation. Those are the kinds of things we're looking for. I will endeavor to find somebody who would participate from the Finance Committee and work with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if they or you will, empower a group of people to do this so that we have something, a year from now or 6 months from now. And I think to Matt's point, a lot of it is the words are great. There's a lot of sort of, people have different views of how some of the stories that gets spoken verbally actually come together. But I think getting this stuff down, and again, this doesn't have to be extraordinarily elaborate, but to get it down, get some commitments, get something that's measurable so that we, you, and the community can see that we're making progress on the things that have been agreed to. So,
Can I just ask one question? You mentioned, do you feel that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund won't ever be financially strong enough to be in the deal flow?
no, I think that if the bank goes through, then you've got a reasonably predictable cash flow stream coming from that, and then from there you can do what many of these banks do, which is go out and leverage it through borrowings. Absent that, I mean, there are a couple of things you can do. There's plenty of money inside the trust fund right now to purchase options or take an option and then go through a procedure of going to special town meeting or annual town meeting. So anyway, I see the chair wants to move this along. So
let's take a vote, but maybe we can add that the Finance Committee chair can be in touch with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund chair and work out a plan.
So, yeah, that's a friendly amendment. I accept that.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Then you seconded it.
I seconded
Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
So 4-1? Yeah.
Quick question. Next time that can be funded would be another town meeting, special town meeting or annual, correct? There's no other.
I mean, unless there was a request for a fall
It
town.
would be at the annual.
Annual, because that's
Because
the
the
budget.
budget's already
That's when we
set.
do budget.
If it was,
Yeah.
if there was something special that could be taken from somewhere if a project came up, there could be a request.
Be different funding source.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then the question is, what do we do with the 300,000? How do we make sure it just doesn't get put someplace? Is there some kind of a holding account we can put it in, or?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier.
So rather than, because I don't think now I'm ready to vote on any particular subject. So
No.
I would like to see it kind of held somewhere.
Brian and I talked about that earlier, and as we go through the budget development process, I would say it will be held sort of off to the side, and then as we get closer, if you all or administration or even FinCom has some sort of a proposal for it, then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the next article that we need a little direction on is Article 30, which is the appropriation into a special stabilization fund for substance abuse prevention efforts. And this is the article regarding using the local option marijuana sales tax. And we talked previously about the amount of taxes collected that would go towards the specific programs. And right now we had 100% in there. By law, you have to have at least 25. And there was a little bit of discussion about whether 100 might be too high. So we were internally mulling over 50 maybe. And then you can always increase or decrease as we go forward and know just exactly how much revenue we're talking about, because we have no idea right now.
We could do the minimum, we could do 25. And then we could allocate more anytime that we see fit to allocating more,
You could do that too.
without even going to town meeting, correct? Like, or do we have to go to town
It has
meeting?
to go to town meeting.
Has to be voted at town meeting.
I think the chances are, the majority of it, or all, it's going to go to human services type area for the community, but we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves, right? If we see a need
Well,
for.
say we get a massive amount of money and it's way more than we ever imagined. We might want to have some of it go somewhere else.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, and what are
But we
what are the estimates?
There are no estimates.
Yeah, so we,
Between now and, I mean,
and next town meeting, probably
yeah.
not,
Yeah, we're probably not going
or
to for
a
a
little
while.
bit.
So we're trying to make it more flexible.
Well,
Yeah.
because we could always use that 75% and we could budget it towards more human service. We budget it, I think we
Yes.
budgeted 450 this year anyway. We could increase that if that's within our purview when we're budgeting, rather than changing this. If there was programs that we wanted it to go to. Yes, am I right in thinking that?
I'm not, yes, it's just confusing sounding to me. But I guess our recommendation, if you need one from town admin, is that we reduce the 100 to something lower, like 50 or thereabouts.
I think 50 sounds reasonable.
Pending.
I'm happier with that. I'm happier at 25. I think because if there's if we have no budget, no guesstimate out of it, I just think, it's easier to let the reins out than pull them back in. And so, I'd be happier going at a lower number and then seeing what happens rather, and not being tied to this much going, because a lot of times if someone gets X amount of money, they'll find a way to spend it. And so, I just think 25 is we should do it. We're showing it's a good faith and we'll go from there. But
And was there going to be something in the motion in terms of a recommendation for how this would be
Well,
administered?
it's in the article. We revised the wording a bit. It's highlighted there, that we would have
the human service?
Yeah. Sorry. I
Thank you.
forgot to-
yeah.
I think the 50 is in good faith as well to what we heard from the voters, wanting it to go towards substance abuse. I think that when it comes to some of the substance abuse and human services, I think it's easy for money to drift away from those. And so I think going to 25, will we really get it back to 50? I think it'll be more difficult to get it back to 50 if there's actually not as much money as we think. I think 50 without knowing the numbers is reasonable.
Then we differ.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to change the 100% in Article 30 to 50%.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
And the reason I think that there could be estimates to this, we know, you can read, we know what percent is this, we've asked the state for. You can go and look at what these stores are doing in Aspen, Colorado. It's in the newspapers. And so, we could do projections on what this would be. I think this is, sort of premature and a blind guess. And I don't like, blind guesses, but.
Okay, next, Article 80, and this is actually not so much of a board direction item as there had been a question previously about what exactly this article is doing, and I asked Lee to, from the Cemetery Commission, to just give you a brief explanation, or Alan.
Edie?
Good evening. Lee Saperstein, Secretary of the Cemetery Commission. Erica, you've got a map. We're going to try and make this very easy. The Cemetery Commission realized that Pulpus Cemetery abuts the next door neighbor on a zero clearance arrangement on their property. The portion of the cemetery against their property is undeveloped. It's basically in shrub, brush, and so forth. And it struck us that if we could do a land swap with the neighbors to get more land in a favorable position, that is to say, away from the road. There are no contours on this map, but the portion in yellow is higher, looks out over the rest of the land. Upon advice from learned counsel, a swap is not just the easiest thing when we're talking about respected property such as a cemetery. So we need permission to convey the land to the neighbors. Apparently, we don't need permission to buy it, and to buy back the other part. Now, the one thing that's not clear in this picture is that the neighbor's land is L-shaped. The yellow belongs to the house. Yeah, well, that's it. Okay. It's a very busy map, but yeah, you're almost there, Erica. Thank you. There we go. So the cemetery is the quadrilateral where the cursor is going. And then the property next door is much more extensive, and it extends behind us. So in concept, it was very simple. Let's just do a swap. In legality, because we have the protected land of the cemetery, we need the permission to convey land to the neighbors. And as I understand it, and I'm looking at council, we don't need the same state permission to buy their land. And that when it was all done, it would be revenue neutral. The one thing that we have to do is ensure through assessment that the two lands that are exchanged are of equal value. Council, have I captured this correctly? Okay, thank you.
Suddenly, is it equal value or equal size?
Equal value.
Who assesses it?
The town has arrangements with qualified assessors, and that would be part of the entire package to ensure. Now, speaking just as a lonely commissioner, I'm hoping that land along Pulpus Road is roughly the same value per square foot, whether it's on the frontage or behind. But if it's modestly different, we'll accept whatever the assessor says.
And then you presented the idea to them, or did they come to you?
We presented to them, and we have a verbal agreement that this is oral agreement that this is acceptable to them. Obviously, it would all have to be spelled out in writing.
And there are no bodies?
If you look at the map, those are those little squares are the existing monuments, and the line that's drawn is really a line that defines grass from shrubland. Yeah. No, we don't think there are any bodies.
Okay.
No, I hope you approve. Thank you.
Thank you. That clarify it for everybody?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you, Lee. lastly, on the warrant, election warrant, there's a couple of items to discuss. So the election warrant is part of the town meeting warrant, and right now we have the non-binding public advisory question, and we have 5 standalone debt exclusions for the various capital programs that you've already heard about. Now, there's a couple things here that need your review. Something came up today about the sewer issue, which let me get to that in a minute. In the meantime, though, we had some previous discussion about the possibility of capital exclusions to fund about $1.5 million worth of capital projects. And when we previously brought it to the board, there was a little bit of question about, have we done that before and how does it work and that sort of thing. And I'm not sure how much detail we've gotten back to you on that, but capital exclusions are one-time overrides that hit a person's tax bill in 1 year and then it's paid for. So the 1.5 in items is comprised of the items that are listed in the Capital Program Committee's report. They're in section B2. It's an appendix B, and I'll just tell you what they are in case you don't want to go looking around for it. It's a tracked aerial lift for DPW, a skid steer, 1-ton stake body truck, 1-ton dump truck, VATCON truck, continuation of CCTV work. All that's for DPW. Fire has self-contained breathing apparatus. IT has server virtualization, and school has a playground item. Those things all total $1.55 million. And the idea would be, our recommendation, I guess, is that we would put these on as capital exclusions, and you have a couple of choices about how you put them on. They could be in one question, or they could be a menu approach where they would all be listed and people would vote yes or no on each one. And we have in the past done that. John and I were talking, and Brian and I talking earlier today about, what's the better approach, and there's pros and cons to both of those. So we need, though, to figure out if you want to put them on, great. How do we put them on?
I think we talked about this. We also asked what were the consequences of not getting these done? And you were going to readjust, I thought, was this that, or you're going to readjust the list to reflect that? No? Maybe it was one of
I don't know that we did any readjusting.
Okay.
Like we don't have 1.5 to reallocate from anywhere else for
I'm
these.
saying the subject, I mean, the line item, you might, replace something, I think my comment was, if these don't get approved, is there something in there that should come from another funding source because it's so critical? And if the answer is no, that's fine.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I
That's
don't
fine.
believe so.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I would assume you would have thought about that.
Yes, I mean, and those were the ones that we felt would be best put through as a capital exclusion.
Most of the others were exceeded in an amount that would really be a capital exclusion.
If we had tried to reconfigure it in a different way, it would have actually probably increased the capital exclusion, which is not something that we thought was prudent either.
I'm happy to see them all in one. I'd be afraid if it was that and Old South Road and they were all together, then, Old South Road is a huge amount and, it may take them down, but I think taken apart, I think it's great.
Well, we just heard what the Capcom went through, and it was a very exhaustive, but well thought out process. So I wouldn't, as an individual voter, I wouldn't be able to do a better job at the ballot.
So you're good with one question?
So then
With all
one
the
question
items?
with the total value on the question. Okay.
That works, John? That works? Okay. So the other item that came up today was the funding for the sewer main failure fix. And how are we going to ultimately pay for it? So by the time we get to town meeting, we will have a stronger number and know more about what that fix can be for now. So we could fund this new project from the general fund. We could fund it from the sewer enterprise fund. We could fund it from both. And our thinking is we don't know that, we probably don't have enough information to make that determination right now, tonight. But perhaps we ought to include a debt exclusion for the project, because you don't need a number for a debt exclusion question. And that would give us the flexibility as we move forward, determining what the ultimate number is going to be, to have sort of like all bases covered for the funding. And if we don't need it or end up funding out of the general fund, then the debt exclusion is moot. So we need to get your okay on that. Good?
I think we should. Yes.
Okay. And we'll be talking to you more about the general fund versus enterprise fund scenario. Those are all the items that I had as outstanding for my purposes to get this document completed, but I don't know if you all have any other questions about zoning or real estate articles.
There were some maps that were in the email. Does anybody?
Are we going to do it article by article, or how are we going to do it?
I don't know, but I thought you were going to do it by, if you have any questions about particular articles, not necessarily go through everyone.
We
but
went over them last week, the last time. But was there some that you wanted to talk about?
I've had so much, I think I'm confused by a lot of it. So it's I just think the process needs to be better. I think that we need to have the stuff come to us earlier, and it trickled in too much, and the maps weren't even here now with what we received, and so I just think that it is what it is.
Could we take certain articles out and, we could take all the zoning articles out and vote on them separately to see if, because I agree, getting maps today, and that's the first time we've seen them. So,
We saw these maps before.
Now, most of them came over a bunch of emails about a week,
Yeah.
9 days ago. But it was hard to keep track
it
of.
was,
It was hard. So.
Are there any specific questions?
Yeah, let me just pull up. I just had a couple questions. I don't think they're major. I was just wondering, Article 42, the Wires Way. Is that for subdivision reasons, or is that?
It is a request by a person who was left out of an earlier rezoning of that area. If you see that particular property was not included with the group around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then, but they're just in the other group, so then that zoning line it'll be a straight line.
Would be straight. Because the other properties on Wires and again on the other sides of it were all included earlier.
Oh, yeah. And then one where, that was the one that we moved into the sewer district.
Correct. That was, and those are only overlay district changes.
Yeah.
So the underlying zoning has already been changed. It's just, that's not a substantive article at all. It's really just a matching the zoning district to the overlay district.
Do you see that when you look at that map, there's sort of that section on South Shore that is out of the town overlay? Do you see that? Is this just going to kind of fill in over time, or is it?
I'm not sure what will happen. What we're dealing with in this article is what has already happened. So those will come up if they do at a later time. I mean, normally when zoning is changed and it involves an overlay district, we like to do them at the same time. But those were citizen articles voted at last year's. Yep.
And then I suppose number 37, just the RC to R5. And there was, I think, was it CN and R1 all around it?
Now, and that's, which one is this? 30?
What number?
37.
37.
Right. So, and I think we talked about this the last time. So it's a commercial district right now. It's largely residential uses in that area right now. And one of the underlying goals of the master plan is to remove commercial zoning or remove the RC district and to match the underlying pattern. So it's the same overall density. It just goes to a residential zone.
So then on I wasn't going to ask, but the article one airport, is it one airport?
Yes.
Taking it out of residential, putting it into commercial.
Right. And the reason for that is I had an earlier discussion with Tom about that. You know, remember these ideas sort of come up over the year, and he is investigating housing for his employees on that property. Which?
Yeah, I was talking about one airport, but I'm keen to hear.
Sorry.
Can we do them by article number so we can get the right picture up?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. We can go through.
No, it's all right, just so we know.
Article 43.
I know, I know.
Do you want to just go buzz through the maps?
I'm happy to go through them if we need to.
Just
Sorry, Libby.
quickly.
We've done most of them before, but I can do a quick.
It might be good for the people at home.
Okay.
That's the last of my questions, just basic.
Okay. So this article is just RC, again, phase out, going to ROH. We've discussed this at your last meeting. Next. Same here. This is, again, part of the RC phase out and, again, matching that underlying district. This is R1 as a district also being phased out. And this is to look at a commercial option on these properties. There'll be a recommendation from the planning board on what to do here after public hearings.
That, going back, that's one that I've had people contact me and have some issues with because of the traffic on Cherry and the
Right.
issue. So there's some people saying, hey, it's already housing, it's already commercial now. So that might be one that may be a little tougher.
I understand that.
You've heard that probably.
Yes, and I expect we'll have some testimony and we'll see how that one goes, yeah. That one we did discuss that one before as well.
Right.
Next one is, this is the one at the airport. Sorry, I got those mixed up. But again, and this is reversed, it's the R5 section is going to CN. So the R5 below will go to CN and that will then be all in one district, not two.
And they have the plans is on the one that says R5 now. That's the plans that we've seen.
That's an initial, that's a very initial concept plan, but again, Tom knows that their regulations require that everything be the same, and so the zoning district has to be the same, the units have to be the same. Is that right, Tom? Okay.
And my take on it is, I think, what's the one that's next door that David Howard did, the one right here?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a nice setup, and they did a nice job there. I think that would be something to mimic in that area. That's sort of for Tom and for you guys.
Yep. Again, we talked about this before. This is Sconset. You can see where the existing village neighborhood is, and this, again, covers some of the commercial uses there to keep commercial uses viable in the village, and that's been discussed. The single property, I think we didn't have a map perhaps on this last one, but you can see it's on the edge. Single property that would go to CTEC from the CN. CTEC is actually a less intense commercial zoning district. And there's a warehouse on that property. It brings that into conformity. This is that single property we just talked about. This property at the corner, and again, I think we'll have some further discussions about this, but in order to implement a turning the turning lane here that was recommended in an earlier traffic study. We're trying to work with this particular property owner. We may discuss with you at a later time some sort of a development agreement here. We'll see how the public hearing goes on this.
Right, and then I'll chime in. There's another one I've had calls on.
Yep.
Some of the concern is that there's going to be commercial from, sort of Richmond all the way up, that this will set the stage to commercialize that whole strip. I understand, but I'm just telling you
Right.
what people are worried about. So.
And that's specifically against what we've talked about for that corridor, to concentrate commercial uses in specific areas at specific nodes. So this property is, if you see that the commercial neighborhood is on the north side of the street in green. So in general, creating a commercial node at that area is something, we have considered. There's the large park, which is the R40 right there. Open space zoning, we've talked about this. It's a long-term policy that where we put open space in the lowest intensity zoning districts to match, to reflect our conservation advancement. And that's just a small sliver. Again, that would go into the LUG3 zone. It's next to a pond. Again, part of land owned by the land bank. This is, Rita, what you had mentioned before, which again, that particular property is currently in the town district, outlined in red. It would go into the country district because it was placed in an LUG zone. Again, LUG zoning is aligned with the country overlay district. The blue on the other side on Wero was placed in the R40 district, which is part of the green in front of it or to the east. So again, that matches the town overlay district.
So that in red is being taken out of town.
Out of town into country. So country gets a net gain here.
Was that a request from homeowners?
Nope. It was, again, part of a citizen article that moved it into LUG 1. So, and now we're into citizen articles, so these are in anyway.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so are we ready to adopt the warrant?
I have one other just sort of general question, and I don't think I'm going to get an answer, but with what's going on with the sewer, with downtown, and with certain parts of the island run through there. So are we going to be constrained with that? Should we be adding things to the sewer district at this town meeting, whether they're citizen articles or not, that potentially are going through something that we don't know whether it's? I just think there's a few articles that may address that, may impact that, and I just wondered, has that been looked at by staff? Has the impact of these articles potentially on the sewer? And I asked Libby, and she said they've talked about it, but it's being looked at in a couple days.
Well, there's a couple things that are going on. We're looking at whether or not we should consider some kind of a moratorium on sewer permits, and I almost don't want to say that because I don't want there to be widespread panic about it. We're simply talking about it and whether or not there's any true impact on the system if we do that or not. As far as adding things in goes, I think that it's probably not, that's something we have talked about as a separate issue a little bit, but, and as I think somebody said earlier, when it comes time to design a new force main or an alternative route force main, if we need to do that, which we probably will at some point, then the size of the pipes will be handled then. But in the meantime, I think it's somewhat business as usual and with a close eye on how we allow additional connections with additional units going in, like more than what the pipes currently are able to handle.
Yeah, my question isn't to promote a moratorium at all.
You know,
But
I know.
my concern is, if we have a system that's under stress and can't handle what it has already, do we want to, make changes at town meeting, that might put it under further stress? Or should we, and I don't know even, I haven't, and I didn't look at which individual articles might do that. So I'm asking, has the sewer commissioner, has the town administration looked at maybe which articles might be putting our system under further stress? And maybe, leading us to a different, more quickly to a worse situation than we are already.
I think I would want to have David and the sewer district criteria group take a look at that, but I don't think there's a lot in the warrant that would be added to sewer districts that would either A, connect right away, or B, have much of an impact on the existing infrastructure. But as David mentioned during his presentation, the CMOM program is meant to identify exactly what you're talking about. And in fact, as we're going forward now, when there are new subdivisions or connections to the main system, David is very closely looking at whether or not their infrastructure is sufficient for the build out of their area, as well as what they're going into, if that is sufficient. And we have started to do things like for the Nantucket Harbor Shimo project, we're going to be increasing, if we didn't already, the line in Vesper Lane to accommodate that area. However, that does lead to some other downstream issues, and Weston and Sampson has prepared a downstream analysis to look at all of those things. So those will be going into soon future capital planning. But in the meantime, I don't know the answer to, is there so much out there that it's going to have a big impact on the existing infrastructure?
See if I can get through this here at all. One thing that I'm paying very close attention to, for example, the Shimo area itself in Monomoy, what this project that we're doing now is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us two things. It's going to be taking the whole Monomoy Shimo area off the current gravity system that feeds the C Street and running a new force main over and tying into the existing force main that comes from Old South Road. That's going to be taking that whole area off of C Street. We're going to keep the connection there so that if flows get extreme, we can alternately run them or run them both at the same time as a reliever. That's also what we're looking at in other areas as we go forward. This whole end of the island here is on one force main from Old South Road, so it's not even included in the downtown area. So that's one thing.
Anything here isn't an issue.
It's on its own force main and goes right directly to the plant. So we're watching that, and I'm working with Libby all the time. We're working extremely closely to watch where things are coming from and where things are going. Vesper Lane, we went from an 8-inch pipe to a 12-inch pipe. So we're watching it very, very closely.
I really hope that there's not any reality towards the potential suggestion for a moratorium on sewer permits.
Let me just say, I'm not even sure it could be classified as a suggestion. It's something that came up as, should we look at this as a result of our current problem?
Okay.
And I tell you that
really worried at what that would cause.
But I got to say that all the public outreach we've been doing and on the boats and everything like that, but the conservation messages have been going out, we are seeing a reduction in the flows.
Oh, that's good.
It is working, and people are really paying attention to that. And especially when you're on the boat and you hear it on the boat, people are talking before you're docked. So it's working. It really is. The numbers are coming down some, so it's helping me sleep a little.
Good. Thank you, David. Can we adopt the
So I will move
warrant?
that we adopt the warrant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Do we need to do the ballot separate?
No, that's the whole thing. You got it. Thank you.
Well, we don't have the regulatory agreement ready, but I think we were just going to get a brief update on Richmond.
I wasn't sure what this agenda item was, so maybe you could.
So the item is on the agenda, Richmond Regulatory Agreement, because we were thinking last week that we might have an agreement ready for the board's review, but actually we don't have the draft quite yet, correct? And maybe just give a quick little background about what this is.
Sure. Tucker Holland, housing specialist. This is the regulatory agreement that is required for the units that Richmond will be creating that are affordable to ultimately be eligible for the SHI list. And so Richmond is aware that this is something that is needed, and they have indicated that their attorneys are working on it, but we have not yet received a draft. Ilana Quirk, who was here yesterday, did mention that their attorney has been in touch recently on this topic, but we have not received the document yet.
Tucker, while you're there, was it in the MOU? Was it specified when it was due, or no?
So we are going to be, I believe, Libby, am I correct, at the February 7th meeting running through the MOU items?
If I have that document.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. We will be. So the answer is following a series of permits and approvals and expirations of appeal periods. They are supposed to produce it, but the MOA does not give a definitive date.
Put the date.
Yeah.
And then what's the difference if we? I'm sorry. If we do this,
yep.
Then are they count to the SHI then as soon as we sign it? Are they counted toward the SHI list, or does it?
It's a good question. And Ilana Quirk, again, has been in touch with DHCD recently, precisely on when they would count. That may not be the sole item, but it is definitely a necessary item.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Might be good to find
So
that out.
we once we submit that item, we'll be able to get a little bit more clarity.
She simultaneously is getting clarity on when it would happen, but it is definitely a gating item.
How does it compare to a 40B application? When does the 40B count toward the SHI?
So 40Bs all count when the comp permit is issued and filed.
Okay. So that's fairly early in the process, correct?
That's the earliest.
Exactly. So the advantage of 40B over this, it's one advantage. I'm saying there may be disadvantages. Is there's a more certain time when it counts? Is that a fair question?
John may be able to answer. That's fair.
I got a yes from attorney didn't give a whole 3 sentences. That's pretty good. Okay. All right. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker. Okay, so we'll hold on that. Committee reports?
Is that NCTV 18 going to be this week, the board meeting? And I want to congratulate them. There's a press release went out today. Oh, thank you. NCTV 18 had a board meeting this week, and I'm the BOS rep on that. And I just wanted to let everybody know that they got an award, Best Culinary Show, for the 2018 Massachusetts Creator Awards. They got awarded that last night. It's a pretty big deal. So for a PEG channel to get that, it was the Shark Bites show they did with culinary with high schoolers. Yeah, so they got an award on that, and they're doing very well fiscally, and everything's going really well at NCTV 18.
I have a couple things. We had NPDC on, I think it was Monday. Good news, in the TIP program, some of the bikes and multi-use paths are sort of, this year they're sort of 5%, but a little more when you add in Richmond, but the future years, it's like 35% of the money we spent, 55, 44 over the next 3. So some of those are, seem to be in the queue pretty good. Number 2, there was a there's a community compact practices that was at the bottom of one of the things in our packet. It was very interesting. we're a member. There's about 300 towns that are members of this, and we used it for a couple of financial things. The state helps you focus on certain aspects, and I think I talked to Libby and Don today, but under human resources, it had a couple of good suggestions that I always talk about: cost out collective bargaining, develop a formal wage and classification plan, prepare a succession plan, which means know how old your people are and when they're going to go. So I think there's, I think we last signed it in 2015. I think, when we re-up it, I would like to see maybe those topics be something that we look at as we go forward. And the other thing, I had one other. Oh, I had an interesting conversation with a person who is work developer, and he said right now that pavers are close to tar for to install. Not the Belgian block kind of things, but the pavers, sort of the flat things. And that is, so I've asked him to get me the numbers on that, to look at that, because that's something that I've dreamed about here. Because I think, when you have to dig up stuff, you can put it right back down again. They look great. I think some of our downtown roads, as we fix them, that might, especially the ones that are small and thin, that might be a better way to do it, especially if it's close. So, those are the three things I ran up against this week.
Well, some of us went to the Mass Municipal Conference, and we had some good updates. I went to the marijuana forum. Katie actually presented and did an amazing job, and we'll be having her come to a meeting in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, depending on her schedule, to give us more of a direct update and answer some questions that came out of it. We all went to a parking forum and learned some good information there that I think that we can use here. So we'll be talking about that more. And then I know that that Libby and Jim both attended a couple of other sessions. We went to some different ones, and it was really good.
And we were in the audience when Andrew gave his presentation on what Nantucket is doing about zoning as kind of a testimonial, and it was great.
I also want to give a shout out to the ZBA and planning who did the 40B informational session workshop. Was that yesterday? I went to that and it was really good. I think I counted 40 people there from the community, and there was a lot of people there who had really had no idea. Probably connected to the Surfside Crossing issue, but I thought it was really good. It was very informative and lots of questions. So I'm a big fan of information sessions. It's just it's great to connect to the public, and so the more of those we can offer, the better. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.